issues, some of them even on a daily basis. The title is Challenges and Responses, the Pro-Israeli Lobbies, Normalization and Building a Transnational Solidarity Movement. Our moderator for the day, who would introduce our four distinguished speakers, is Junaid Ahmad. Junaid is a PhD candidate in Islam and decolonial thought at the University of Leeds in the United Kingdom. He holds a Juris Doctor degree from the College of William and Mary and currently serves as the Secretary General of the International Movement for a Just World in Malaysia, as well as the Director for the Center for Global Studies in Lahore, Pakistan. Since 2009, Junaid has taught law, religion, and politics at the Lahore University of Management Sciences and the University of Management and Technology. He previously served as a lecturer and researcher at the University of Cape Town's Department of Religious Studies. Junaid is also the founder of an Al chapter in Virginia and the Palestine Solidarity Committee in Pakistan. It gives me great pleasure that Junaid is with us. Junaid is also the son of the late Mumtaz Ahmad, a dear friend who was a pioneer in his own right. Thank you, Junaid, for being with us. And without further ado, please welcome Junaid Ahmad and the rest of the panel.
Thank you very much, Dr. Al-Arian. Assalamu alaikum. Peace and blessings be upon all of you. It is a great honor to actually be the chair and moderator of the final session of an absolutely fantastic conference. I think people will agree on that. And that has encouraged lots of debate and discussion, but convergence as well on the pressing needs of the struggle to liberate Palestine. So it's a great honor for me to moderate this distinguished panel. Our first speaker is Samar Dahmash-Jarrah, who is a Kuwaiti-born Palestinian American speaker, journalist, and educator. She is a contributor to CNN World Report, news editor and reporter for Jordan Television, editor and reporter for Jordan Weekly, and a political science instructor at the University of South Florida in Tampa. After the 2001 World Trade Center tragedy, Dahmash-Jarrah was asked by many community organizations, churches, temples, and peace groups to speak about the Arab world. These events and the Iraq War served as the inspiration of the book, Arab Voices Speak to American Hearts, a first step in fostering direct dialogue between Americans and Arabs. Dahmash-Jarrah holds a Master of Arts degree in political science and a Bachelor of Arts in Middle East Studies. The title of her presentation is Israel's War Against the Palestine Solidarity Movement and the Role of the Pro-Israel Lobby. So please help me welcome Samar Dahmash-Jarrah.
I'm hoping that being last is ختامه مسك إن شاء الله. Thank you everybody for coming. It's not easy to be listening to such a topic after having kufta this afternoon. The only day I was dying to eat meat, but I did not, so I can stay alert. Thanks for having me. Thank you, Doctor. We go back to many years when the doctor was going through the turmoil. Our radio station and my co-host had the courage to always have his wife Nahla to be on the show to talk about the ordeal of Dr. Sani and the family. And I wish she is here to salute her, because none of this could be possible really without your wife Nahla, and I salute her. The Israel lobby in the US is very important. And there is no way Junaid will allow me to explain all of it. So what I'm going to do today is maybe just explain a little bit for those of you who are not very much familiar with the history of the Israel lobby, just explain a little bit about it, and then move into the new developments that we are witnessing in the USA, which really started a while ago, because the lobby has become extremely vicious since a few years ago. I will concentrate on maybe two main issues, which is the campus activism and how the Israeli lobby is targeting that, as well as the legislative efforts to criminalize boycott and criminalize companies that actually boycott the state of Israel or businesses connected to the occupation. If there is time, maybe I will go through other groups of people that the lobby targets in the USA. So let me begin by telling you that the Jewish diaspora and the Zionist diaspora in particular paid attention to the importance of the USA maybe after the Bolshevik Revolution. And long time ago, they realized that the center of the universe is going to be the USA. And they have been active in the US in different ways and means since that time. But maybe in the past 70 years, let's say, they formed what we know now as the Israel lobby. It's very important to understand it's not one unit and one group of people or one ideology. It's more than 100 Israel affiliate organizations and sympathizers that sometimes they might differ and might have some disagreements. However, they all agree on two major points. No compromise when it comes to this with the Israel lobby. Number one is to make sure that the USA will always support Israel unconditionally and forever, no matter what Israel does. Number two is that the US aid, economic aid and military aid to Israel will always continue, no matter how prosperous and rich Israel can be. So to do that, they needed to affect policy. It's very difficult to influence the White House until recently, but very difficult to change foreign policy through the White House. So the Israel lobby was able to do that through the Congress by having a voice in the Congress, not by having people who run for office, but as much as monitoring and making sure that the Congress is always continuing with this support. Also, you need to form policy, to write papers, and they did that through think tanks in Washington and elsewhere, where they would write papers, for instance, why we should invade Iraq, although Iraq has nothing to do with the September 11 events, why we should not have a nuclear agreement with Iran, why we should be antagonistic towards Iran. So these policies and thinking about these policies happen through the think tanks. And finally, which is very important and I think reflects to what Ramzi was talking about, and maybe later on you will be listening to this, is the right to the story, the narrative. Who controls and has a trademark of telling the story of Palestine and the story of the Arab-Israeli conflict? In their amazing skills in mass media, the Israeli lobby has always maintained a foothold and a trademark on the telling of the story. So really, throughout the years, they have had very little competition from Arab Americans or from Arab governments. They had it very, very nicely laid out for them. Things started to change in 2004. In 2004, something interesting happened on the international level. The Palestinians went to the International Court of Justice, and the court decreed that the wall is illegal and that it encroaches on Palestinian land, and according to international law, it should stop or be dismantled. So what happened after that ruling? Nothing. Exactly nothing. And this led the Palestinians to realize that the only reason Israel is capable of continuing this policy of settler colonization, of oppressing the Palestinians, of confiscating their lands and depriving them from their human rights, is the complicity of the nation states and governments and international institutions and businesses that do business with Israel and profit from oppressing the Palestinians. So 170 civil society entities in Palestine, representing all walks of life, decided that they need to bring the cause of Palestine to the grassroots level, to the global level, to every human and every citizen in the world. That they no longer need to talk to people in power, but they are going to go to the grassroots. And I think this is one of the brilliance of the BDS movement. It became a direct relationship between people. But the BDS managed to change the discourse. When I have been living in the US for more than 29 years, throughout my life I'm lecturing. People were always debating whether it's occupation or not occupation, wall or not wall, checkpoint or not checkpoint. The BDS movement shifted the debate. It talks about today, who is uprooting a tree? Who is forcing a Palestinian to take his violin and play it at the checkpoint? Who is losing her child at a checkpoint? Who is destroying a house? Who is demolishing a house? So it changed the discourse. It's no longer an argument about history and an argument about legalities. It's a human rights argument. It's founded in human rights and universality of man. And I think this is the brilliance of the BDS. And then there is an end. When you talk to Americans, they tell you it's complex, it's far away, you people have been fighting each other for thousands of years, we can never find a solution. The BDS movement changed the debate, and it said, actually, we are only requesting three things. We want to dismantle the wall, because according to international law, it's illegal, but it's inhuman. We want to get rid of the settlements and the checkpoints. We actually want to get rid of the occupation. Number two, there are Palestinians who live in the state of Israel and they do not have equal rights. Actually, there are more than 80 laws in the state of Israel that discriminate against Palestinians who are citizens of the state of Israel. Number three, they said, well, there are Palestinians, like my mom, for instance, who wants to go to Al-Majdan, near Gaza. And Dr. Salman Abu-Sitta, I think, explained very vividly who are the Palestinians who have the right of return. So what was the reaction of the state of Israel? I can tell you that according to some of you might have seen this documentary by Al Jazeera called The Lobby, that unfortunately was not broadcast. Israel felt that the BDS movement and the spread of grassroots level activism for Palestine is an existential threat. It is a threat that does not only delegitimize the state of Israel, it can end and dismantle the state of Israel, especially as a Jewish state. Meaning, although the BDS on an official level does not adopt any public stand whether the solution should be two-state or three-state or a new state or one state, but eventually when you want to get rid of all these three, or if you want to implement the three things I mentioned, eventually you will end up with one democratic state. How do I know that this is a threat to Israel? Because they have created in 2006 the Ministry of Strategic Affairs. If you go to their website, you might know the names of 2 or 3 people working there, but most of them are ex-generals and ex-Mossad agents, and they use amazing technology and ability to wage psychological warfare on activists in the USA. They are masters in data gathering, information analysis, and following students' organizations. They use one of the most sophisticated apps where if you are a student and you post something on a platform that next Monday at 6 p.m. we're going to have a meeting about Al-Auda, in 30 seconds they are aware of it and capable of passing this information to Israeli affiliated associations or entities in the USA where they garner support in order to create false disagreement. I want just to quote a study, if you want to Google that. They have published a very interesting study. It's called Terrorists in Suits, like me and everyone here wearing a suit. Terrorists in Suits, the ties between NGOs promoting BDS and terrorist organizations. Meaning, and it says that pro-activism, it is connecting pro-activism with terrorism. It leaves no space in this time and age where we have a global war on terrorism. It tries to tarnish the reputation of people by labeling any kind of NGO that works for justice for Palestine or promotes BDS as an NGO or a group of people that works with terrorism. Just to give you an example, they have a budget of $72 million just to have lawsuits against professors. And I think in this room we have Dr. Rabab Abdelhadi, and she can do a whole lecture about the psychological warfare that she is enduring. It is fine for you to be attacked, your work, or to be defunded, or to attempt to kick you out of education. But there is a human toll on the human being. There is a psychological toll and a physical toll. And they are spending $72 million, and that's my statistics from many years back, in order to make a person like Dr. Rabab not teach. They do mention Dr. Hatem Bazian, American Muslims for Palestine, and every organization that I go to their conferences, so we are guilty by association. So BDS, how did it spread in the USA? Why would the director of this ministry come to the AIPAC conference and say, we are at war. I want you to forget every cause that you are wasting your time on. Just concentrate on BDS. Who is spreading BDS in the USA? The students. The young students, the SJPs, the Students for Justice in Palestine. We have thousands of campuses in the USA. These students are not like their parents. They are very comfortable with their identity, their American identity, their rights under the Constitution. They are outspoken people. They're not like my mom who said, don't say this, don't say that, don't get involved in politics. Why do you have to give a lecture? Why do you have to travel? They are different. They are the ones who drag their parents into Al-Auda events at their colleges and demonstrations. So the SJP normalized Palestine. It made the idea of wearing a kufiya, the idea of making hummus and falafel and call it Palestinian, they made it seem so normal. Now they created something called the Canary Mission. The Canary Mission in 2015 attacks the students themselves. They got tired maybe a little bit with professors. They are now attacking the students, again having a blacklist. So if you want to go and run and have a job after you graduate, they call your job and say this and that were involved in terrorism. There is something called Palestine Legal. They say that in the past 2 years, about 500 times Palestine Legal rendered their support for students who needed help. Let me tell you that something happened. It's a stealth campaign to legislate laws where you criminalize BDS. In 27 states in America, which represents 250 million Americans, and almost 78% of the American population realized that they have a law that says if they want to apply for a contract to clean the bathrooms in the prison system, there is a clause in the contract that says they cannot boycott Israel, and they cannot boycott the territories controlled by Israel. In another word, they cannot boycott the settlements. But there are also laws that say we will punish the companies that actually boycott Israel or boycott the economic part of it. 27 states, 250 million people. So we have this young Saqib Ali, he's an American of Pakistani descent. He decided to take the Maryland government to court And he said, I do not want to sign this. And only April 12, he won the case. And he won the case not because the legislative body of the Maryland government decided that they had a debate and said this is unconstitutional. No, because of the grassroots movements and because they are the ones who called and emailed and used the American Constitution and Supreme Court cases to prove that it is unconstitutional. There is the case of Bahia Ammori. It just came out less than 48 hours ago. Bahia Ammori is a speech therapist. She lives in Texas, and she wanted to renew her license and found out that she has to sign that she pledges not to boycott Israel. And luckily, she just got an approval from the judge to stop the case. This is 48 hours ago. I just want to conclude by saying that the Israel lobby does not only target Palestinians and sympathizers with Palestine who are of Arab and American descent. They are targeting anyone that links the BDS movement to South Africa, but most importantly, African Americans. The African Americans have an amazing struggle and the story to tell in the USA. That's why they attack Black Lives Matter, Mark Lamont Hill, Angela Davis, and have went so far to ask the lawyer of Dr. Martin Luther King to write a paper saying why he would support Israel. I am very hopeful because there is change in the Congress, there is change with the millennials, the young Jews, and there is a change, believe it or not. Trump galvanized many of the Jews. They are afraid because he is in bed with white supremacists who are racist and anti-Semitic. And you saw 2 days ago in San Diego, one of his supporters just attacked a synagogue, and 6 months ago also attacked a synagogue. I just want to tell you why I am hopeful, because many years ago, a student of mine, I think from Ethiopia, told me, Mrs. Jarrah, when spiders unite, they can suffocate a lion. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Samar Dahmash-Jarrah, for a brilliant presentation, incredibly incisive and comprehensive. Our next speaker is Huda Ammori. She's an activist and writer from the United Kingdom of Palestinian Iraqi heritage. She has finished her studies at the University of Manchester in finance, and she founded and chaired the BDS and Palestine Solidarity campaign there in Manchester, and currently she's the campaigns officer and coordinator of the national BDS campaigns at the Palestine Solidarity Committee in the United Kingdom. So it gives me great pleasure to welcome Huda.
Hello everyone. I'd like to start by, of course, thanking Dr. Sami and all of the organisers here today. And I have to say it's such an honour not only to speak in front of all of you, but to be speaking amongst such great speakers and experts and to have met so many people during this time. So I'd like to thank you and everyone for that opportunity. So I will be speaking about the national BDS campaigns in the UK, but I want to begin with how I became an activist and the campaigns I ran before organising national BDS campaigns. So as you heard, I am Palestinian and Iraqi, so I was sort of born political. And when I went to university, I was engaged in several different things, but one night I decided to Google University of Manchester and Israel. It was like 1 a.m. in the morning, and what I found kept me up that whole night because I saw that the University of Manchester had a memorandum of understanding with the Technion Institute in Israel. And the Technion Institute are the leading institutes in Israel for the research and development for Israel's arms trade, and they are partnered with Elbit Systems, Israel's largest private security firm, who actually market their weapons as battle-tested. Battle-tested due to them being tested on Palestinian civilians in Gaza who were trapped under this brutal siege. And I was shocked, to say the least, and I was shocked to see that nothing had been done about that situation. until that day. So I set out to pass the boycott, divestment and sanctions motion at my students' union, which passed with a majority. And then shortly after, I started researching more into my university's investments. And I discovered that they were investing millions. The university, which I'm paying tuition fees towards, was investing millions in companies like Caterpillar. And Caterpillar, as some of you may know, supplied the Israeli army with armoured bulldozers used to demolish Palestinian homes, Palestinian communities, schools, infrastructure, and also used to build Israel's illegal settlements and apartheid wall. All whilst the University of Manchester had a socially responsible investment policy saying that they will not invest in companies complicit in human rights violations and armament sales to military regimes. So I thought, oh, this is going to be easy, right? I'll divest tomorrow, which I tell them. Turned out to be a lot longer than that. But after I became very active and more students got engaged on campus after passing the BDS motion at the Students' Union, I then set out to organise for Israeli Apartheid Week. And before Israeli Apartheid Week took place, we had a number of conditions. Some of them I didn't agree with, but I went along with it in order to have these events take place and in order to be able to spread the message of the campaign. And one of the speakers I invited was Marika Sherwood, a Holocaust survivor. And a few days before the event was supposed to take place, the university suddenly ramped up the conditions, saying that we had to change the title of the speech, censor parts of what she was planning on saying. And I went to the media, and the media covered the story at the beginning, but what came out afterwards was much more telling as to what the university was really doing. So I sent in a Freedom of Information request to the University of Manchester, and I asked them for all correspondence between the university and the Israeli embassy in the month before Israeli Apartheid Week. They didn't respond, which wasn't a shock, to be honest. So after a month, after 20 working days, I went back to them, they wouldn't respond. So then I went to the Information Commission Office, who are the body who regulate the Freedom of Information Act in the UK. Then they issued a decision notice to the university saying that if the university didn't release the information, they would face contempt of court in the High Court. So then the university finally released the information, and what I found was that the Vice-Chancellor of the university, who is openly pro-Israel, had a meeting with the Israeli embassy the day before they increased all of our conditions. And in this email from the Israeli embassy thanking the university, they talked about the meeting covering their concerns over the student BDS campaign with the Vice-Chancellor who wouldn't meet her own students at her own university, and also asking that they censor the Holocaust survivor on basis of anti-Semitism. Which is a bit outrageous. So after I got this email, I sent it to a friend at The Guardian, and The Guardian covered the story. The university was massively embarrassed, and needless to say that the next Israeli Apartheid Week went a lot smoother, and the university didn't impose their conditions again. And then shortly afterwards, it was 100 years after the Balfour Declaration. And Haim Weizmann, one of the leaders of the Zionist movement who secured the Balfour Declaration, was a staff member at the University of Manchester at the time. So the Israeli embassy saw it fitting to begin their celebrations at the University of Manchester. Myself and other students, BDS students at the university, didn't feel the same way. And we had about a few weeks' notice until the event was supposed to take place. We organised a protest, we went to the media, we got statements from academics. We have around 100 academics at the University of Manchester who turned out to be very sympathetic to the cause. And we got statements from student societies. And 2 days before the event was supposed to take place, the Israeli embassy announced that they had cancelled the event at the University of Manchester. And subsequently, they decided to move it to the Hilton Hotel. So we decided to continue with our protest, starting at the University of Manchester and then marching through the streets to the Hilton Hotel, which they had no idea we knew where they were, and we by far outnumbered them outside than the people inside. And when I left the University of Manchester, which wasn't so long ago, I understood the extent of UK universities' complicity. I knew it wasn't just the University of Manchester. I knew that this was happening everywhere in every single UK university to some extent. So I set out to send information requests to all of the UK universities to uncover their investments. And right now I'm actually compiling this data, but with this data I discovered that there's hundreds of millions invested in companies arming Israel by UK universities who claim to be pillars of social responsibility. So when I joined, I became staff at Palestine Solidarity Campaign, I organised the Student BDS Conference, where we had many different students from different universities who came to develop divestment campaigns and BDS campaigns on their campuses so that they could also organise campaigns and hold their universities to account for these injustices. And shortly afterwards, we actually had our first victory. I thought personally it was going to take longer than that. It took about 2 or 3 months, and some brilliant students at the University of Leeds managed to get the Leeds University to divest from 3 companies who are arming Israel. And this was a great achievement, the first UK university and the first of many, I'm sure, to come. And this led to the first ever apartheid off-campus day of action, where I organised over 30 student groups to take action on their campuses, first on the UN Day of Solidarity with the Palestinian people, to demand that UK universities get apartheid off campus. And it was so inspiring seeing so many students take different actions to hold their universities to account. And this really is an example of how ordinary people, ordinary students, are the people who can pressure our institutions, hold our institutions to account. It's almost a moral obligation, especially when your tuition fees are being invested directly into it. It's no longer an issue which is so far away, one issue of many that we all need to think about. You know, it's directly, your university is directly investing inside it. And it's an example of how students can drive change on their campuses. It's an example of how everyone can hold institutions, financial institutions, to account. And when we hold these institutions to account, we cause a change of culture. And then when we have so many UK universities in one of the countries who were so complicit, were one of the ones to begin the whole Zionist movement, then we can hopefully see a ripple change and a change in our UK government's policies as well. And so I would like to talk about financial institutions now. So I mentioned before when Norman Finkelstein was on about HSBC. So actually I think it's very fitting to talk about HSBC because I had the joy of seeing HSBC everywhere in Istanbul airport when I arrived, literally everywhere. But HSBC actually invests over 830 million and provide loans worth up to 19 billion for companies arming Israel. One of these companies, again, being Caterpillar, they invest around 100 million into Caterpillar. And many actually financial institutions invest directly into these companies arming Israel. But the difference with HSBC is that they love to brag about being ethical. They have policies against them being involved with businesses whose products are in illegal operations. And actually Caterpillar has a policy which says that their products should go towards developing the prosperity of communities. So it's quite ironic that they are so complicit in Israel's militarized repression of the Palestinian people. But since the campaign against HSBC began, we have over 40 groups in different towns and cities taking action outside their local HSBC branch to demand that HSBC divest from these companies arming Israel. We had over 30,000 people directly into HSBC. And actually, when the Great Return March began, I was in Manchester at the time, and we went every single week to protest outside HSBC in solidarity with those who are repressed under Israel's military and apartheid regime. And in December 23rd last year, we got an email directly from HSBC announcing that they had divested from Elbit Systems, Israel's largest private security firm, which was a great victory from one of the world's biggest banks, also like to call themselves the world's local bank. We prefer the world's lethal bank. But that was an amazing victory, but only the first step to come for many of this campaign. Now I'd like to talk about as well the arms trade on a grander scale. So as I mentioned before, we know that Israel's arms companies are actually testing their weapons on Palestinian civilians in Gaza, and they benefit massively so from having essentially a live testing field, which no other country has. And it hurts me and pains me to actually talk about this, but this is the reality that we're facing. And it's not just the UK who are, and Western countries and European countries who are trading, who are buying and selling arms to and from Israel. It's also countries like Turkey. In 2008, Turkey made a $141 million deal to buy military technology from Elbit Systems. They continue to buy weapons and military technology from Israel via the UK. So the military export licenses will come from the UK, but it is going directly to Turkey. And I want to say this because it just shows that anywhere you are in the world, we have to look at these institutions, these financial institutions, our government, and hold them to account. Because to show solidarity with the Palestinians in Gaza, we need to put ourselves out there and hold these institutions into account and spread the word and fight for the Palestinian people who are there fighting every single day on the front line. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Huda, for speaking about what concretely has been some major victories in the UK that she's been a part of. And I can proudly say that at the University of Leeds that I've been a part of, that just happened last, last October. So it was something huge in the British context, and particularly at a place like the University of Leeds. So the momentum for this such activism is growing tremendously, and that's very encouraging. Our next speaker is Mr. Berdal Aral. He's a professor of politics at Istanbul Medeniyet University. He received his PhD in 1994 from the University of Glasgow on Turkey and international society from a critical legal perspective. Professor Aral has concentrated on international law and human rights in both his teaching and his research. He is author of 3 books, including Self-Defense in International Law, Collective Rights as Third-Generation Human Rights, and From Global Security to Global Hegemony, UN Security System and the Muslim World. Additionally, he has numerous articles published in Turkish and English on international law, human rights, and Turkey's foreign policy. The title of Dr. Aral's presentation is Normalization and the Legalization of the Occupation. Let's welcome Dr. Aral.
Assalamu alaikum. Thank you for the presentation. I'm very delighted to be here, and I believe that this conference is going to be great, provide great benefit for understanding the Palestinian problem, and of course, on the way to a viable solution to the problem. And my presentation rests on the following 4 questions. First question: what is the real meaning of the Arab normalization with Israel? What's the meaning? What's the real meaning? What's the meaning of it? Secondly, what are the Arab nations' motivations behind normalization? Third question: what are the likely implications of the process of normalization for the Palestinian struggle? And finally, what are the alternative strategies vis-à-vis Israel that are more in tune with the aspirations of the Arab peoples of the region? Normalization is a concept used in international politics and international diplomacy. Normalization can be brought about by 2 rival actors, for instance, one state occupying territory of another state, such as the case of the United States invading Vietnam, for instance. That's one example of normalization. In the case of the United States and Vietnam, when the occupier ends the occupation, there is now a new way for signing an international treaty. The parties, governments recognize, they establish diplomatic relations, and they recognize each other's situation. That's one case of normalization. But there's another normalization when the oppressor ends a continuous operation, of course, there is no normalization. When the operation ends, there is a possibility of the oppressed and the oppressor coming together and establishing a relation and recognizing each other. This could probably fit to the case of South Africa during apartheid. During the Cold War, the apartheid system established racial discrimination, systematic racial discrimination against the non-whites. And of course, the non-white people never accepted apartheid system. They never recognized it as normal. The same applied for the neighboring states called frontline states, such as Mozambique, Zimbabwe, Angola, Botswana. They never recognized South Africa as normal, apartheid as normal. But after the apartheid system ceased to exist, then of course there was a possibility of establishing normalcy between the non-whites and the neighboring states as well and the South African government. However, if it's not the case, that means if there is no end to occupation and no end to oppression, and if the oppressed or the occupied accepts to recognize the reality of occupation or oppression, and if they sign a treaty, this is not a normal treaty. Under international law, we call this treaty unequal treaty. This is called unequal treaty. A treaty of capitulation, a treaty of surrender. I think the whole process involving the Palestinians and the Israelis and the Arabs and the Israelis, it seems to me, fits to the final pattern. Because there has been no possibility, sensible possibility of establishing normalcy between the Palestinians and the Arabs versus Israel because of the fact of occupation, because of expansionism, settlements, checkpoints, siege, and so forth. So I think this is the context to understand the problem. In from the Arab, in the context of the Arab world, normalization then is actually making something abnormal into normal. Israel is a case of, it's an irregular case. It's a fraudulent case. It has an apartheid system which is not recognized by part of international society. It's an oppressive state. It's a colonialistic settler state, and every sensible person would know that. And I think, as I understand the word for normalization in Arabic is takbir. I am learning some Arabic, so I checked with Brother Sami, and he said takbir. I have to follow takbir, as I understand. Okay. In order to accept this abnormality as normal, the oppressed, I'm not referring to, of course, the ordinary Palestinians, but those who have recognized the reality of Israel and Arab governments who have been establishing some degree of normalcy in Israel. That's I'm addressing these actors. For them, the fact of colonization and occupation becomes normal, something that cannot be avoided. You cannot avoid it, or you disregard it, or even if you are aware of it, you think that that's the fact of life, and you have to accept it. And I think this is something that is not something sensible. This is against ethics, against law, against political realities, I think. The first move towards normalization was made, as you well know, of course, between Egypt and Israel, through the Camp David Treaty. Camp David Accords 1978, 1979 did not only establish peace between Israel and Egypt. Interestingly, the treaty contained a very interesting clause. It says, not only will the parties recognize each other, after Egypt recognizing Israel, because Egypt is a state, and establish diplomatic relations, but also they will establish normalization. This is really abnormal. Because in an international treaty, when two entities recognize each other, it is up to them to decide whether they want to establish a deepening of relations. It's a matter for them. It's not a matter for the treaty, because we cannot predict what's going to happen. But no, in the case of Camp David, Egyptians were asked to establish normalcy with Israel. And I think that's, again, something that we have to think about. However, as you all know, Egypt did not manage to establish close relations with Israel. Of course, they had some contacts. Of course, they recognized each other, but it did not bring some really a degree of normalcy, okay, as we understand it today. Because the people were against it, and of course, because of the Israel aggression continued. However, the Camp David Treaty had one great advantage, among many other advantages, a number of advantages for Israel. One of them is actually allowed Israel to begin to integrate into the system, into the Israel system. Secondly, it managed to get a lot of money from the West, from the United States and from some of the Western governments, because it was seen to be a kind of Islamic state. It was able to actually exert greater economic control in the region. And finally, it was seen by the Zionist state as a license for further aggression. Egypt was now pacified, there was no longer Egypt in the equation, and of course, it was time to attack Lebanon. Israel turned to Lebanon and actually in 1982, as you all know, it was a full invasion of Israel in 1982, when of course some massacres were committed in 1982. And I think that this pattern is very important, and it seems to me that the process that we are witnessing today, that is normalcy between Arab governments and Israel, is actually beginning to show signs of Arab states becoming like Jordan. I call this Jordanization of Arab governments. For me, it's Jordanization of Arab governments. What do I mean by that? I mean, first, that Jordan, as I understand from my readings, that Jordan was always against a viable Palestinian state. It was always collaborating with Israelis, sometimes open, sometimes secret. And this is, I think, something that we have to think about in terms of normalization. And the Jordanian approach was followed by the Egyptians, because as you well know, in Camp David Treaty, there's only autonomy being provided for Palestinians. And then I tell you that two French lawyers, actually, they argued that the Camp David Treaty is illegal under international law. Why? Because it denied jus cogens. It was against jus cogens. Self-determination is a jus cogens norm. It's against the national aspiration of the Palestinian people. It was a great violation, a breach of international law. So, to continue with the Jordanian case, first, Jordanian region thinks that it cannot exist without Israeli support. My argument is that this Jordanian case is being now emulated by other Arab governments, by most of the Arab governments, in particular Gulf Arabs, and of course Egypt as well. The second point, Jordanians have come to see Israel as a strategic ally against, certain threats. Thirdly, Jordan, in 2014-15, Jordan actually was a member of the Security Council, United Nations Security Council. You know what? A draft resolution condemning Israeli violation of international human rights, actually it wasn't supported by Jordan. Jordan abstained from supporting this resolution, which I think indicates how normalization is going to continue if this pattern persists. Today, obviously the example set by Egypt and Jordan has been now being followed by some other Arab governments, including the Gulf states, and especially the Gulf states, for instance, Saudi Arabia. Following the Oslo agreements in 1993, they found a fertile ground for an excuse for improving ties with the Israelis, of course, secret ties. They had now warmer feelings towards Israel. So it was the beginning of a process, it seems to me, that the cold peace between Egypt and Israel was now being replaced by a kind of normalization, which began in the 1990s, the middle of the 1990s, based on, in particular, common enemies, the so-called common enemies, like Iran, Iraq, radical movements, Muslim Brotherhood, Hamas, Hezbollah, and now, of course, ISIS. So based on common enemies, the enemy of my enemy, my friends, this is the logic, is beginning to be applied by many other Arab governments as well. So I call this, as I said, this process as Jordanization of the Arab world. Indeed, the connections between the Arab governments and Israel, they have increased enormously. And they have established economic ties, security connections, intelligence, sharing, some secrets, plots, some political understandings, joint actions, you name it. It has increased enormously in recent years. To the extent that a speech made by Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, he said in the United Nations General Assembly, September 2006, he said, "Our peace treaties with Egypt and Jordan continue to be anchors of stability in the volatile Middle East. But I have to tell you this, for the first time in my lifetime, many other states in the region recognize that Israel is not their enemy. They recognize that Israel is their ally. Our common enemies are Iran and ISIS. Our common goals are security, prosperity, and peace. I believe that in the recent years ahead, we will work together to achieve these goals, work together openly." I think this is a clear admission of the extent of deepening ties between Israel and the Arab states. What are the true motives behind our normalization, including the Gulf states, Egypt, and possibly some states in North Africa as well? What are the major motivations behind it? How do I see it myself? First thing I think is that, as they can admit, it's the enemy of my enemy, my friend. That's the logic. Because they think that the so-called radical movements, and of course Iran has gained enormous advantage, geostrategic advantage in the Middle East, through directly or through its proxies, and that this has been threatening the security and even perhaps the existence of the Gulf states. So for them, establishing a connection, common action with Israel is something sensible, because they are acting against their common enemy. Iran is the common enemy, ISIS is the common enemy of the Arabs as well as Israel. That's the first reason. Secondly, I think they want to establish this normalization because they simply want to get rid of the Palestinian problem. They think that it's really a nuisance, that it's actually preventing, acting as an obstacle to furthering the economic and social, so economic and political welfare, that the Palestinian problem is actually becoming a kind of a permanent obstacle to their emancipation. So they want the problem to be dumped as soon as possible through a palliative solution, which we have discussed in the morning, actually. Thirdly, they also see not only Iran but Turkey as a kind of enemy, as their adversaries, because Turkey and Iran, they have certain common faculties which actually irritate them. Both of them are resisting American designs. They are both resisting Israeli designs in the area. They have some legal representative systems allowing freedom of vote. They are powerful, politically and militarily. Fourth, they think that the United States and Israeli support, they are essential for the existence, for the continuation of the region. Because these regimes, it seems to me, that they are not really rooted in really substantive support from the people. There's a really big gap between the people and the rulers. And they think that the United States and Israeli support is essential for the continuation of these regimes. Fifth, they of course consider Israel, the Zionist lobby, as an intermediary, a useful intermediary in enhancing their cause in the United States. Sixth, they don't want democracy to take root in the Middle East. They are really wary of the possibility of establishing democratic system in the Middle East. And finally, I think, again, this is my personal opinion, these states have come to emulate Israeli foreign policy strategies, I think. They have come to internalize Israeli actions, like engaging in secret plots, conspiracies, crude militarism, assassinating opposition, opponents, plotting against other governments, engaging in coup d'etat against other governments, and you know that now, for instance, some of the Gulf states have been engaged in military operations in Yemen, for instance, in Libya, and so forth. So I think they have come to emulate Israel. Israel became their model, it seems to me. And this is also behind the normalization process. But I think it's a bad strategy. Why? For me, first reason is that the claim that Iran is the greatest threat to the area is actually wrong. I mean, it's an exaggeration. It's a distortion. The real threat, as everyone knows, is Israel itself, because it has invaded Palestinian territories. It's an expansion state. It has also invaded some Arab territories. It has never supported peace in the area. It continues to militarize. It has been one of the main factors behind militarization in the Middle East for the last 70 years. So I think it's really exaggeration to say that it's Iran, not Israel, being the main threat. Secondly, public opinion surveys indicate in Arab world that actually the Arabs do not consider Iran as the great threat. They say, the public opinion surveys indicate that 90% of the Arabs, they think Israel is the threat, the main threat in the area. Of course, they don't, most of them don't like Iran, it's 66%, but it's less than, far less than Iran. And they regard Israel as a colonialist, racist, expansionist state, and they don't want the recognition of Israel. Actually, 87% of the population, they are against the recognition of Israel. Third, if they continue to go the normalization process, possibly those political forces which they hate, the so-called radical Islamists, are going to gain greater, I think, credibility in the sight of the people, and they will say, it is only we who can defend the rights of the Arabs, the Palestinians. Fourth, this would also mean that we should forget about the Palestinian suffering. It's actually a betrayal of the Palestinian cause to come to accommodation with Zionist settler colonialism. It means normalization of Israel. And also, a final point, it's not going to achieve the purpose. Even if those claiming to want to form normal with Israel, they say we are going to become friendly with Israel, we are going to gain economic and political play, they are actually wrong. They are deceiving themselves. Why? Because there is no evidence to suggest that Israel wants to be part of the Middle Eastern system. No, it doesn't want to be part of the system. Because the way it conceives itself, it sees itself as superior to the Arabs, it continues to militarize, it continues to advocate unilateralism against the Arabs, military superiority, and it is the way in which the Israeli society can be put together. It's only against aggression, in the context of aggression. It's against the Arabs' enemy. Arabs are considered as enemies. Otherwise, Israeli society is very heterogeneous, it's too heterogeneous, and it's the only way they can actually unite the people. There has to be a common enemy. I think that's also very important. So, and one Israeli scholar is raising the question, could Israel become an integral part of the Middle East and still maintain its unique character and cohesion? And his answer is no. So, I think there's no point to fool ourselves. I'm finishing. Normalization is definitely a great damage to the welfare and security of our peoples. And final point, for lack of time, unfortunately, is that what's the solution there? In my opinion, the solution is first resistance, definitely resistance, not accommodation in Israel. Secondly, Arab governments should, and Arab peoples of course, should give all sorts of support to the Palestinian people in their struggle against the Zionist state. And thirdly, boycotting Israel is very important, I think. The Arab boycott, the Muslim boycott, and the United Nations Security Council boycott, I think, is the right course to take. This is the only way the possibility of the liberation of Palestine could be achieved. And final sentence, I'm finishing. I think for the Arab world, I think without democracy, without authentic democratic systems, freedom to vote, the rule of law, transparency, and independence of judiciary, that means self-determination for the people. If it's being achieved, I think this will be the main ingredients for a dignified and, of course, free and secure world for the Arabs and the Palestinians. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Professor Aral, for that excellent analysis, both geopolitical and geopolitical analysis and also international law perspective on the issue, and particularly mentioning when speaking about the Jordanization of what's going on, I couldn't help but remember Ali Schleim's little book, Collusion Across the Jordan. But it's really a lot of interesting insights there that I hope that the discussion can further advance. Our final speaker is a dear friend, Naeem Jeenah. He's a well-known intellectual and leader in the Muslim community and among anti-capitalist and anti-war movements in South Africa. He's currently the executive director of the Afro-Middle East Center, a research institute dedicated to studying the Middle East and North Africa and relations between that region and the rest of Africa. Naeem has also taught political studies courses at Wits University and holds various Islamic qualifications through international courses completed at different universities in the Muslim world. He has organized and addressed numerous meetings, seminars, workshops, conferences, and training programs on various issues related to Islam, South Africa, the Middle East, youth development, journalism, and information technology in South Africa and internationally. The title of his presentation, Building a Transnational Solidarity Movement for Justice in Palestine. And as impatient as he is, let's all welcome Naeem.
Free, free Palestine! Free, free Palestine! Free, free Palestine! Free, free Palestine! Look, I'd be asleep as well if I were on that side. There's no reflection on the speakers I've learned before. It's just end of the day and tiring. I want to thank CIGA for this invitation and for getting me here to speak at this very important conference. And I think that the past 3 days have been really valuable for all of us. Obviously, with any such event, I'm sure that CIGA has made one or two mistakes, at least one that they'll regret for a long time, and that's inviting me to speak. But, you know, some mistakes you just have to live with. I have the distinct displeasure of being the last speaker in the last session of the last day of the conference. It's a very daunting position to be in. I stand before you very intimidated, and I'm just a girl asking a book. Oh, wait, that's a movie review mixed up. Anyone knows what movie it is? Like junk culture, you people don't imbibe? No? Notting Hill? Come on, guys. Sad. Anyway, I do stand here intimidated, even though not a girl asking a boy. And the main reason for that is that I got the sense that the whole conference was building up to what should be the last panel, and the panel should be, the topic of that panel should be the topic of what I'm going to present. This is what everything was building up to, which means that I really have like this huge burden on my shoulder that expectations that I really can't fulfill. So it is scary, but nevertheless, let me try and get into it. I'm making the assumption that in the main this is a kind of internal discussion that we're having, and so I will treat it in that kind of way, and I will try to be critical with what I'm saying, a few points that I want to make. Also that, after being at the conference for 3 days, there are some things that just irritate you through the conference, and being the last speaker, I'm going to use my privilege to to express my irritation. So the topic, I'm sorry, I haven't been teaching at the University of Witwatersrand for 14 years, so that's incorrect. My topic is building a transnational solidarity movement for justice in Palestine. Chandra Mohanty, the famous feminist, Indian feminist, says that solidarity must be based on what she calls a common context of struggles against specific exploitative structures and systems. Now I say this because I want to make the point that solidarity is not about humanitarian assistance or pity or giving. Solidarity is a political act. Rather, it is a political process that creates political relationships. And that is how we should understand solidarity as we're going through this topic. I also make this point because in the In the era of NGOization, and Palestine is a wonderful example of the worst meanings of the term NGOization, solidarity has come to mean less a process of struggling together and more a process of, or more one of privileged people being human rights defenders or providing humanitarian assistance, whether food aid or campaigns for political prisoners, etc. For too many people, solidarity is viewed in a kind of individualistic way. To campaign for injustices perpetrated against this or that person, rather than to campaign against the overwhelming structures of oppression that keep entire oppressed populations under their jackboots. It's much easier to campaign to free Marwan Barghouti than it is to campaign against Zionism. In too many of our societies, solidarity has become, quote-unquote, professionalized, with salaries, career advancement, marketing budgets, etc. Solidarity is not just about doing some good for others, with emphasis on the word for. Let me say a few words now about the notion of transnational solidarity. Our understanding of transnational in relation to solidarity and solidarity networks must go beyond the idea that this means just solidarity across national boundaries. Indeed, our objective is to develop solidarity in such a way that it disrupts and undermines national boundaries. We can see this, for example, with numerous Palestinian communities spread all over the world. We also see it with some activist organizations. Lubna spoke about the PYM, for example, and I think that the PYM seeks to do that, to disrupt these national boundaries rather than organizing within them. Margaret Keck and Catherine Sicking talk about this in terms of, quote, the negotiation and malleability of identities and interests that unsettle the inside and outside of foreign or domestic political divides. These networks, they say, participate in both domestic and international politics simultaneously, drawing upon a variety of resources as if they were part of an international society. Often, the usefulness of solidarity networks, they go on to say, is to facilitate action in what they call a boomerang pattern. By this they mean that activists who are, or people who are oppressed in a particular national context would bypass their state and directly seek out and engage international allies in an effort to get those allies to then put pressure on their states from the outside. They list 4 tactics around this. I'm not going to get into that because I think I want to be as short as possible to allow more time for discussion. But let me say that they consider solidarity networks in this discussion as being south to north. Oppressed insiders desiring solidarity from empowered outsiders. And this is precisely what I don't think we should think of solidarity as. For our particular case, there's a few problems with that. Let me raise a couple of them. One, that if we're talking about Palestinians are both inside and outside. Secondly, for the Palestinians who are outside, they are both north and south. But more fundamentally, my argument is that solidarity networks for Palestine should be primarily, not only, but primarily, networks of oppressed peoples. That is, the solidarity of the marginalized with each other. South-South solidarity is more important, I believe. And even when South-North, the important sector is the South within the North. And you'll get to understand what I mean by that. So in the United States, for example, since many of you are Americans, the greatest effort, I believe, should be for solidarity should be with marginalized communities, African Americans, Native Americans. In South Africa, much greater effort needs to be made for solidarity networks that include the impoverished and their organizations, rather than the ruling elites, even in a country like South Africa. But what would the point of all this be? Isn't it more important to focus attention on those in the US Congress or in big business or in political parties in countries like mine, under Rashida Tlaib's and Ilhan Umar's, where we should really be focusing our efforts on? solidarity, comrades, is not the same as patronage. And what we want is solidarity, not patronage. And struggles for justice are not supposed to be a continuous process of getting for particular causes, or just getting for particular causes. This reminds me, just as an aside, of how in my country, as in many other countries, there's an ongoing debate about foreign policy and about the balance in South Africa's foreign policy between values and interests. Struggles for justice ultimately result in the realization of interests, but at their core, they should be about values: justice, fairness, equality, the fair distribution of wealth and other resources, etc. Of course, we hope that all states will also behave in this way too, but that's not going to happen in the near future, perhaps with a free Palestine. That's why South Africa, despite this ongoing debate in terms of our foreign policy, continues to sell weapons to Saudi Arabia and the UAE, our two biggest purchasers of our weapons, despite Yemen, and despite the counter-revolutionary, anti-human rights agendas of those states all over the MENA region and beyond. They're still good customers, so we will adjust our values for them. Those of us who are activists and believe in solidarity cannot accept that as being normal and as being what we will go with. Our task as oppressed peoples is not to make privileged people feel good that they're doing something for us, nor for us to assuage their consciences for what their states or peoples or ancestors or families have done or are doing to us. Timothy Segal says, these relationships are not about a northern partner gaining credibility by establishing their solidarity with and not for a disadvantaged other. They are about disadvantaged northern partners also looking to put pressure on the northern state. This is how we should be understanding solidarity that we're talking about. This kind of solidarity, which is between marginalized or oppressed groups themselves, means that it is a double-sided solidarity, where groups or communities in solidarity articulate the causes of justice of them both. These are solidarities of mutuality. If we want real solidarity, if we want to feel part of each other, then they need to be solidarities of mutuality. Let me just mention one incident. Recently, the institution I work for, the Afro-Middle East Center, together with the institution that Rabab works for, or Rabab is with, I'm not sure, works for, whether you get paid a salary. Very long name, Arab and Muslims ethnicities diaspora studies. Okay, at San Francisco State. We organized as part of the project that Rabab is doing, called Teaching Palestine, pedagogies of praxis and invisibility of justice. One leg of that program was in South Africa, and it included a conference and a study tour. And even though the theme was teaching Palestine, the entire study tour was about South Africa. And we emphasized at the end of it that part of the reason was that we as South Africans, third world people, as people from the country with the greatest inequality in the world, with 25% unemployment rate, etc., we are fully in solidarity with the Palestinian people. But we also expect that you are in solidarity with us. And so that's why all of the Palestinians that were in the group went to visit impoverished townships and women's hospitals where it seems like it's a hopeless situation. Places that look worse than any Palestinian refugee camp, and I don't say that flippantly. Because that's what solidarity is about. It's a two-way street. It's about us feeling with each other and as if we are part of each other. And so recently in the US, we've heard these slogans. Gaza stands with Ferguson, for example, famous slogan. Or when I see them, I see us. I think this one encapsulates what I'm talking about. When I see them, I see us. That's solidarity. The temptation for us to understand solidarity as being in the form of the South wanting solidarity from the North is great. And of course, there's good reasons for that. Those in the North have more to give. So, that's a great temptation. It's a temptation that we should temper. I'm not saying avoid completely, and I'll explain why just now, but that we should temper. So I'm not suggesting that we completely exclude lobbying those who are in power, or taking advantage of the good-heartedness of Northerners, or of privileged people in various parts of the world. Or for that matter, I'm not suggesting that we should never interact with political elites, whether in northern or in southern states. I am suggesting that these be the targets of our work, but not those that we are in solidarity with, even if they feel that they're in solidarity with us. Let me move on a little faster there. Let me raise a few problematic or critical issues that I think exist in our attempts at solidarity. And part of this is for those of us who are in solidarity with the Palestinian people, and part is for Palestinians themselves. You can throw tomatoes at me afterwards or while I'm speaking. Both are acceptable and welcome. My first problematic issue I want to raise here is this love affair with big parts of the solidarity movement with the idea of non-violence. Perhaps this is part of the reason why the BDS campaign has taken off as well as it has, because of this notion that this is about non-violence. And I have a problem with this. This love affair, this romanticism of non-violence, firstly serves to delegitimize armed resistance, which is legitimate, of course, even in terms of international law, and is the choice of a number of Palestinians and Palestinian groups. You can't claim to be in solidarity with the people when you delegitimize their chosen strategies or tactics. So one thing that it does is delegitimize armed resistance. Secondly, that it actually subtly or not so subtly dictates to Palestinians how they should respond to their oppression. And none of us has the right to do that to oppress people. So I think that this is the one thing I want to flag. There's this trope, there's a new word that I learned from the Zionist, trope, so I'm trying to use it whenever I can. There's this trope that I've heard many times. If only Palestinians were like Mandela. And so another version of it is, where's the Palestinian Mandela? This is one of the irritations that I've found over the past 3 days. Just mentioning this thing. Firstly, which Mandela do you want? You want the teddy bear-like Mandela whose statue is in the richest mall in Johannesburg, standing there, kind of in a statue of him dancing? Or do you want the Mandela who founded Mkhonto we Sizwe, the armed wing of the ANC? Which Mandela are you talking about? Mandela was not sentenced to life imprisonment because he supported Satyagraha. He wasn't a passive resistor. He was sentenced to life imprisonment because he founded an armed wing of a liberation movement and engaged in armed activity and was trained by our comrades in Algeria on how to fight and how to fire a gun. So this notion of a peaceful Mandela versus violent Palestinians is an insult, forget about Palestinians, is an insult to Nelson Mandela and his memory, and an insult to all our martyrs. And I take this very personally because my brother is one of those martyrs. When he was found in the middle of Durban lying on the ground, he didn't have a white flag with him. There was an AK-47 lying next to his body. It also feeds into the construction of Palestinians and Africans and Muslims as pathologically violent, whose women send their children out to die. Whose women send their children out to be killed. You know that story. My second problematic issue here is this whole thing that we go on about, and I understand why we do, but let me say why it irritates me as well. The question of unity. As if nothing will happen in the Palestinian struggle until there's unity. What does unity mean? I'm a little unsure of at the moment. But this issue of unity, I think, is something that we need to interrogate carefully. Look, despite whatever other South Africans might tell you, and there's no other South Africans to dispute me in the hall, so I can say whatever I like. Despite whatever other South Africans might tell you, in our struggle in South Africa, we did not have unity in the liberation movement. In the 1980s, we were literally killing each other. Adherents of the Black Consciousness movement and the Congress movement were killing each other. I don't say this with any sense of pride. This is something that we feel sad about. But my point is that we won, some people might say we didn't win, but okay, we won a liberation struggle despite that. That you cannot hamstring your entire struggle by the notion of unity. Yes, there's working together and all of those kinds of things, but I think when we stop everything because of this, then there's a question that needs to be asked. The attachment of many of us in the solidarity movement around the world to Palestinian quote-unquote civil society, and in particular to the BDS movement and the BNC, is, I ask myself, and I ask all of us, is this a substitute for an attachment that we should have to the genuine representatives and leaders of the Palestinian people? Because it seems that leadership doesn't exist. And so we attach ourselves to anything that we feel can be representative. This is a huge challenge for the solidarity movement, but of course an even bigger challenge for Palestinians. The question of unity versus reconciliation versus a common vision, etc., is something that we should look at. Perhaps what Palestinians should, and again, this is one of those things that you can throw tomatoes as you will, because I'm not a Palestinian, and so I have no right to dictate or say what you should be doing, but nevertheless, I will say, yes, my time is almost up. Okay. That perhaps what we should be struggling for is a process by which Palestinians can develop a common vision for their future, rather than trying to get everyone to unite, because maybe that's not going to happen. My third problematic issue here, and I'm going to go fast because Junaid is going to push me off the stage on this side, is the question of the indivisibility of justice. If we're talking about solidarity, and we're talking about being in solidarity with each other, I gave you the example of South Africa. But by the same token, I'm not saying that it hasn't happened, but I have hardly ever heard Palestinians talk about the struggle of the Kashmiri people, despite the similarities being quite stark, actually. Even bigger issue. I haven't heard Palestinians talking about the struggle of the Western Sahara people. But if we want solidarity, then we need to be principled in the solidarity we get and we give. And we need to regard justice as being justice for all people. But even in more smaller contexts, not just national contexts, we cannot, on Facebook the other day there was this whole debate. Some guy who's, big kind of Palestine solidarity activist starts sexually harassing on Facebook a woman activist. Such people are not acceptable in our movement. I'm sorry. And let me say that recently during the Teaching Palestine study tour that we had an incident where 3 of our guests because we were the hosts, 3 of our female guests were sexually harassed by someone who is a leader of the Palestine solidarity movement in South Africa. This is not acceptable. And these are people such as this should be gotten rid of from the movement, because it's not justice, it is not real solidarity. Let me come to a conclusion. We do need a broad strategy that we can say that the Palestine solidarity movement around the world adheres to and travels on. The BDS campaign can be at best one leg of a broader strategy. It is not a strategy for the liberation of the Palestinian people. I think in the absence of a broad strategy, many of us have tacked onto that and held it up as being our strategy. It's not. This is a critical point that needs addressing primarily by Palestinians and their quote-unquote leadership, because I'm not sure whether that exists, but needs to be addressed. Shall I just end?
No, I was joking. We actually didn't really wanted to end, but because of time, and I'm sure our discussion will generate a lot of interesting viewpoints that, of course, Naeem will have time to respond to at the end. But after these excellent presentations, I'm sure there's many questions, pointed questions in the audience. So we'll now open it up to the audience for questions, not speeches. Please.
Hi everyone, thank you for a proper conclusion for this conference. And actually my question is for Ms. Huda. I salute you in your perseverance for all the steps you've taken and your colleague, but I want to ask you, in addition to perseverance, what other steps you've taken actually, because you know the Zionist lobby is very powerful and they try to crack down on every step that try to compose the complicity between British universities and Zionism and also Israel. Thank you so much.
Okay.
Thank you. This is a little bit of a speech, but I'm not going to make it too long. First of all, I really thank everybody for such great interventions and also for a great conclusion to the conference. So thank you really for doing that. I have just very short, actually there are not going to be speeches, just very short comments, questions. One on the question of civil society. I agree with Naeem that the 2005 actually civil society call. If you look at the list of the organizations, they're not what would be classically described as civil society. There are actually a lot of Arab liberation movements. There is a majority of the factions of the PLO. There is a whole lot of things. It's a very mixed up group of things. And I think people use the notion of civil society because of the emphasis on civil, because civil means not military, not state. And so in a way we also think of the state. We talk about wanting power in order to actually change the terms of engagement and so on. But at the same time, when people have power, then it kind of becomes a dirty word because it's a state and so on and so forth. So, I mean, that's a very big discussion about the whole question of national liberation and what happens first and then and whether it's post or not. But I think it's very interesting to look at the list, 170 organizations. The second point is the question of what do we do with somebody like Ilhan Omar and Rashida Tlaib, which Naeem alerted to, and some of you have spoken about it. Do we think about them as actually part of the elite, or do we think about a different kind of thing that's going on? Are they ever going to become part of the elite? I mean, even if they think they're going to be part of the elite and they have hopes to become part of the elite, do they ever become part of the elite? Do they ever become part of the elite in a satellite colonial nation state that is built on the genocide and the enslavement and so on of other people? Would it even ever be possible, even let's not talk about the US, Israel, would it ever be possible to actually see somebody who's a homeless organizer of Ethiopians, I'm not even talking about Palestinians, okay, who actually can become in the leadership of it and actually really rule, not as a token, okay, I'm not talking about tokens and so on. So I think it's a question to also think about that. The question of the Arab governments, I was thinking about, I mean, we as Palestinians we should hold the Arab governments accountable and the world accountable about Palestine. But it's very difficult to do so when the Palestinian, some part of the Palestinian leadership, and I don't want to say the Palestinian leadership, because not all of us consider the people who are in Ramallah leadership. I mean, in order for you to lead, you really have to earn that leadership, especially in a place where it's not imposed upon. So it is very difficult to do so. It's very difficult to let the governments of the world and everybody around, and I'm not justifying for Jordan and Egypt and so on, but it's very difficult to do so. My last point was the question of, that Naeem alluded to, the whole question of what does the indivisibility of justice mean? And I don't want to only talk about the solidarity movement, because the solidarity movement is very important not to have anybody who violates any kind of principles of justice. I want to talk about people who are also involved in the national liberation movement, the anti-colonial movement. And I don't want us to get in Palestine to a point where we're going to have to deal with a whole series of Me Too, because there are Me Toos there, and I have a problem with the terminology and the whole liberal notion of it and so on. But I think it's really, really important for also to think about that. What are the divisions? What is happening with Palestine? How are we dealing with people? And how are we actually building some kind of a different world where we are not thinking of our own people as Palestinians, as people who are going to be having our own charity. We're going to go help them, we're going to go do with them. It's not just in the solidarity movement, it's also a question of what's happening also in the liberation movement. So the reverberations of the solidarity movement, that doesn't happen before the liberation movement. I mean, I think both of them need to be put together and have their integration. That we really need to think about that too, and holding people accountable. It is not acceptable anywhere. I mean, we really have to do red lines in all of these issues. Thank you.
Thank you. Some speeches we like.
There's a woman there.
Please.
Hello, my name is Sarah. I'm from Manchester, England. Hi, Huda. I just wanted to say thank you. This was one of the sessions that I particularly enjoyed in the conference, and thank you to all to the panel, and also thank you to the organizers for bringing us together today. In particular, I really like the point made by Naeem, Jeenah. I feel that there are particular ideologies that are holding us back, even as part of the Palestinian movement, and some of them you mentioned, such as being afraid to recognize oppressed groups' right to be able to fight to defend themselves. And I think that I can only speak from a UK perspective, because that's where I'm from, but I feel that even the Palestinian movement, as activists, we sort of buy into these ideologies, and our minds are also shaped by this, and we're afraid to actually stand up for in solidarity with the Palestinians on that level. So I was just wondering, I mean, what can we do more to actually tackle this kind of a mindset that's even found within activists, even that are supporting many of these movements, but they're sort of towing the line of the people that are oppressing them in a way.
Thank you. Yeah.
Thank you very much for this great panel. I would like to emphasize the use of terminology and the importance of the meaning that the term holds. For Dr. Berdal, yes, the word tatbiya, you know, tab'a in Arabic means nature, and tatbiya is to assume a nature that is not yours. And if I want to have my own etymology for it, tatbiya, there is biya, which means to sell. Actually, if you want biya, you have to sell part of your soul and identity to assume another nature to be accommodating to your enemy. So I just wanted to say this as a comment. That's one thing. The other comments for our dear brother Naeem. Yes, where is the Nelson Mandela? We have tens of Nelson Mandelas, but what kind of Nelson Mandela we need? I would like to bring your attention to the statue of our dear brother Nelson Mandela that they brought to Ramallah. I wrote on my Facebook, they brought Nelson Mandela and put him in the Ramallah Bantu stand. So Nelson Mandela is just like standing with his amandla in the Ramallah Bantu stand within a Bantu stand context. And your question to say, well, the Palestinians were not actually in solidarity with other liberation struggles. This is post-Oslo, and we have to understand, prior to Oslo, all the revolutionaries, people from all over the world, the national liberation movements used to come to Beirut, to come to our camps to be trained to go and fight from Nicaragua, from Ireland, from Kurdistan, from Iran, you name it. We were the beacon for revolutionary struggle, and that's why we have to distinguish what this Oslo disaster did to the soul of the Palestinian revolutionary struggle. And that brings you on to your last point, and our dear brothers and sisters, about the BDS strategy and the non-violence, because our president is the chief of the la unfu, non-violence, and the kissing and hugging of your enemy. And yes, we need, and the last thing I would like to say, an integrated strategy that is multifold, and it stands not on one leg, many legs, but that's what I want to hear your comments. What kind of integrated strategy at this juncture that we need? That's what we need to discuss in order to be effective in ending this apartheid and in liberating Palestine.
Thank you, brother. Yes. Yeah, right there.
Aral from Palestine. Excuse me, some of what I wanted to say you already said, because the question of solidarity with Palestine, solidarity with the outside world, Naeem, was also a process that existed before. It's not the fault of the Palestinian people today that there is less solidarity from the Palestinian towards the outside world. We are in conflict, we are in contestat. You have no idea how much Palestinians are isolated from the external world. We have less and less access to go outside, even to travel and to mix with the outside issues. My question actually, there is a big strategy issue that we have to talk about. Maybe later, maybe another meeting needs to talk only about the strategy. But my question today to the panelists today, do you think the solidarity movement, international solidarity movement with the Palestinians have been intimidated, or it's gaining its momentum at this historical moment? Because in Palestine we are somehow confused. We don't even have a full picture of what is happening outside. In order to be able to look forward, to establish these contacts and relationships outside of NGOization of the relationship, where we are standing today, there are so many efforts going on, but we still need to put it in a framework of structure, somehow the structure where we can also exchange of information, exchange of activities, and be able to understand how every network is working from different parts of the world. This is not clear for me. People are working from different parts in the world, but not necessarily that there is a lot of shared information, a lot of shared experience, or at least activities that is taking place. Thanks to this conference that we somehow start to know what are other initiatives that exist that I personally didn't know about. Although I'm from Palestine, I'm involved, I'm more aware of what is happening than others, but really I was not that exposed to understand what is really going on. This is one thing. The second issue, when you talk about Palestinian leadership and the normalization issue, we are also criticized, to tell you, that we are the first one from the Arab regimes. Yeah. We are the first one who normalized with Israel. Unfortunately, this is not the Palestinian leadership. These are the Israeli agent leadership that exists. But this is not the Palestinian leadership. And this is what the whole world should understand when we talk about normalization with the Israeli occupier from the Palestinian side. We are not. Palestinian people are completely out of this normalization process, and we are not part of it. If the leadership did it, we should not be held responsible for this normalization with Israel. The Arab regime, one of the major reasons why the Arab regimes are normalizing with Israel, because this is their role, this is why they ever existed for. If those who didn't agree with normalization, they are not there anymore. They are all destroyed and even assassinated and killed. So either you cooperate with Israel and you are not in power. This is the condition. This is how CIGA had been organizing the whole region in our context. So my question is the strategy. Please, let's talk about the strategy and how we can reproduce the strategy. One last comment, please, if you allow me, because I didn't have my chance to talk. Yesterday you were talking about the youth I didn't have the chance to talk about it. We skipped from this conference a very important experience in the solidarity process. In the history of the solidarity process, the first Palestinian Intifada in 1987, where the youth and women and everybody was taking part, and that moment with the international solidarity around the world had started to organize itself and be aware of the Palestinian struggle and Palestinian the Israeli oppressive measures. This is a very historical moment. This is an experience of Palestinian revolution that nobody somehow had been skipped out of the debate. And this is, I would love that you review this period and see how Palestinians had been struggling a real revolution in their history, and this could have led to so many victories that unfortunately also agreement came and destroyed. And the youth were a very important part, and I was part of this process, where we led the street, and we were around about, we had a clear vision how we want to liberate Palestine. And this had been buried forever, unfortunately. And that was my last comment. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Yes, okay, on the back.
Hello. Assalamu alaikum. Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you, Mr. Junaid, for this opportunity. I have a question from Dr. Berdal, sorry for the name. If you think that Iran is not a realistic common enemy for Israel and Arabs, and I'm sorry for the word Arabs, I mean like Saudi Arabistan, I mean the UAE, so I believe the same. So then what you might consider as a common, or as a kind of a measure or main cause for the Israel, or for the cooperation between Israel and Arabs, if we not consider Iran as a realistic perspective? So what would be your answer? Thank you.
Someone over here? Yeah.
This is.
Okay. This is a question or comment for Naeem. I'm not clear about what you said at the last about BDS not being a strategy. Correct me if I misunderstood you, but when I read the call of BDS, there are four things in there. There's self-determination, there's kicking the Zionist entity out of the West Bank and Gaza, there's absolute equality within the 1948 occupied territories, and there's right of return. I mean, this is, for me, I think this is a very powerful, if you add it all together, a very powerful goal. You might call this a strategic goal if all these four things are fulfilled. And this is amazing. So I'm not sure, I'm a bit confused. BDS seems to be getting a sort of a bad reputation for various reasons, but even amongst solidarity people. But I think we should go back and reread the call and see how strong it actually is. But
thank you.
What do you think about that?
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Excellent presentations. My question is for Junaid and Samar. How do you assess the Palestinians' collaboration with the solidarity movements, especially Palestinians in historic Palestine? How do you assess really their relationship and relation with the solidarity movement?
We've kind of out of time unless there's one last burning question. No? Okay. So what we can do now is we can have the panelists respond. They can take up to 5 minutes, but they can certainly take much less if they want as well. So please, we'll begin from the far left for Naeem.
I'm glad, Junaid, that you finally admitted my political position on the far left. Let me start with the last question. Look, two things about this. One is that what you presented as being the demands of the 2005 call are excellent demands, but that's what they are. they're not a vision for a future Palestine. So that's the one thing. Secondly, they don't represent a strategy, which is the point I was making. That's not a strategy. Let me give you an example. In the South African struggle, we would have said, or we say, that the strategy rested on 4 pillars. The 4 pillars being, number 1, mass mobilization within the country. Number 2, the armed struggle. Number 3, the underground movement. And number 4, international solidarity. Okay? So 4 pillars that make up a broad strategy by which we will employ to liberate our country. BDS, I believe, is one element of a strategy, or can be one element of a broader strategy. What is the broader strategy? The 4 things that you listed are demands of that one element. But there isn't a broader strategy. That's my point. Okay, let me not belabor it. Let me go to some of the other things. Said, I agree 100% with everything you said. And Hanan, I agree with everything you said. I'm not sure that I can, in the 5 minutes that I have, even if I were able to, answer the question about what should be a strategy. I think that the point of the conference is that we begin that process to engage, to develop that. So I think that the question is absolutely important, and it's the question that should emerge not out of this session but out of this conference. I'm not, of course, going to be able to answer it. The question, Hanan, whether the global solidarity movement is growing or is intimidated. I think that I would say that it's a mixture. At one level, for example, the BDS movement has grown tremendously. I mean, when I compare it to how the similar movement in the South African case took 30 years, and still after 30 years didn't achieve what the BDS movement has achieved for Palestine in less than a decade, the first decade, from 2005 to before 2015. The growth has been huge and enormous. So on the one level, I think that trajectory continues, even with all the battles that are taking place, and the battles are, of course, an important and a necessary part of the growth. On the other hand, I think that you're counterposing that with is it being intimidated? I think that is happening in certain parts of the world. Certainly my reading, and there's people from those parts of the world here can say if I'm wrong, but in North America, in Europe, for example, the Palestine the opposition to the BDS movement, together with Islamophobia, the meteoric rise of the right wing, all put together, I get the feeling that many activists are intimidated, and they're forced into being intimidated. So I think that it's a mixture, and so the challenge for us is how do we deal with that? How do we ensure that people that are activists and budding activists feel protected, feel that they will not be they will not suffer terrible consequences as a result. I don't know the answer to that, but I think that's what we should be talking about. So the question from Sarah kind of related to that. How do we tackle those who are afraid in their context? It's a difficult question. Look, I live in a very luxurious situation as far as activism is concerned. The ruling party in my country 2.5 years ago hosted an official leadership delegation from Hamas and made Khalid Michal look like head of state. That's the country I come from, so I can shoot my mouth off. But where you come from, it's very different. For those who live in North America, it's very different. So how do we deal with that? I think that this is, I'm sorry, I'm repeatedly saying this, but this is an issue that needs lots more thinking and careful thinking, because I think that we haven't worked out broadly a strategy how to deal with these attacks that we've been faced with. As I said, together with the Islamophobia and the rise of the right wing, it presents a threat to us that we haven't faced before, and that we need to work out what it is and how to deal with it. So I'm not answering the question, but I'm emphasizing what you said. Rabab, I take your points. Just one thing to say about the 2005 call you said. You know, this is of course what I often say when the issue is yes, but you know, what about the political fractions? Well, there's a line there that says the national and Islamic forces, all right? So it's quite clear. The fact, however, is that you have a situation where in the past decade, the two times, past, say, half a decade, the two times that Abu Mazen came to South Africa and was asked about BDS, he rejected it. And then the embassy then had to, you know, scramble around to make it sound acceptable. So you have mixed messages coming from the political forces. And so we're not really sure. Do they support it? Don't they support it? We're clear that in general, across the board, Palestinian civil society does. But the political forces, you know, this one says yes, that one says no. Then, of course, you know, he came 11 months after him was Khalid Mishal. So Khalid Mishal took the opportunity every time he got a platform to say that Hamas supports BDS. So, you know, you get these mixed messages. And anyway, that's on the issue of Ilham Omar and Rashida Tlaib. Look, I don't think that we should regard them as part of the elite. There's no indication for me that they want to, up to now, be co-opted into that elite. But the reason I said that they don't deserve lots and lots of our energy is because also how long will they last? While, you know, African American organizations on the ground will be there for this generation, even if Ilhan Omar might not be there after 2 years.
Naeem?
Yeah, I'm done.
Okay, great. Thank you. Professor Aral?
I think one comment, but I think that one comment and one question, but the comment also I think suggests that I should say something about the comment. So I'm going to make a short addition to the comment. Okay, about the Palestinians are against normalization. I have no doubt about that, and I think I implied in my presentation, of course, Palestinians are not, most of the Palestinians, apart from those who are part of the elite, possibly, they are opposed to normalization, and as are other Arab peoples. All the public opinion surveys indicate that the Arabs all over the Middle Eastern geography, they actually are opposed to normalization. They don't want Israel to recognize. They think Israel is a colonial state, racist, aggressive state, and that brings only war and conflict in the Middle East. So in that sense, there's no doubt in my mind, of course, that the Palestinian people are against normalization. The second issue about the question, what are the reasons behind the Saudi rapprochement with Israel? Is it only Iran or are other cases? Of course, Iran is actually used, manipulated by the elite in the Gulf as an excuse to approach, Israel. There might be some degree of truth behind the Iranian threats, and there are some Shiite elements in the Gulf which, the Arab elite, Sunni elites regard as a threat to their power, and they think they are destabilizing influences. And I can understand that, although it's exaggerated, but I think behind that there are other factors we have to mention, such as, for instance, the Saudis have come to believe, I think, that they rule, the country of they rule is increasingly dependent on the US and Israeli support, because there's the gap between the people and the regime, I think, is increasing. It's really increasing to an extent that it's not possible to bridge it in the medium term. They feel our democracy is, I think, another factor. Saudis, United Arab Emirates, Egyptians, and probably some other Arab governments. They detest the idea of democracy spreading in the Middle East. And of course, they detest the idea of a democratic Palestinian state as well. There's no doubt in my mind. And I think there's also the element of Israel is beginning to teach them how to act, actually. Israel has become their teacher, it seems to me. United States and Israel are actually indoctrinating our governments in order, in a way that that are militarizing their foreign policy. They are beginning basically to involve in civil wars. They are supporting coup d'etats, sponsoring certain anti-state groups. They are killing their opponents. Khashoggi is one example. So I think they have come to internalize Israeli strategy, Israeli Middle East. And this means that I think they are beginning to be isolated from the Middle East. They have come to be isolated. They have become aliens. The leadership, I am talking about leadership. And I think that's also something that they think about. Besides, they think that Israel played a major role in enhancing their bargaining position in the United States because the Zionist lobby is very powerful. They think that Israel is going to support them in the United States when they want to buy weapons, for instance. Of course, not to use against Israel, to use against Iranians and possibly against AP if they ever revolt. And I think the Arab revolutions indicated to the Saudis and some of the Arab governments that they are in danger, that the people have come to become self-confident about overthrowing them, and now they are taking measures, countermeasures against that possibility. Thank you.
Thank you.
I'll respond to that question at the back, but I'd like to first say something on BDS, because it's not quite a lot. And also to comment on some of Naeem's comments as well about BDS. I'm not an academic, I think that's pretty obvious. I would consider myself an activist. And I'm not a historian. I didn't get involved in the BDS movement because I understood every single little bit about the history. I got involved because I saw my university was so deeply complicit. And when you look around, universities are investing hundreds of millions, I mentioned it before, pension funds. In one city, they've got 200 million in Israel's apartheid regime. I mean, sometimes I don't see BDS as necessarily the ultimate strategy. I just see it as basic. Like, why would we allow these institutions to be investing and putting all this money into Israel's arms trade when it's our money, when it's on our doorstep, when we're the citizens of that country? And I sometimes think, I think Ramsey mentioned this before, but I sometimes think we make things too theoretical and not necessarily practical. And as an activist, I'm extremely practical, and that's how I think. And so when I hear things like that, saying BDS is a non-violent movement undermines violent resistance, I mean, I just don't see that, because I think as students or as people who are campaigning for BDS in the international level, like, of course it's going to be non-violent, of course we're going to be protesting outside, of course we're going to be approaching inside to try and get that divestment, and that's what we can do as being international, is those things that are directly in front of you. When you follow the money, it's on our doorsteps, the link to Israeli apartheid is on our doorstep, and when we stop that, or when we campaign against that on an international level, and we build a mass movement, then we're not there yet either. So when we see the strategy isn't working, we are very early in the stages of BDS, so we're not even there to say that. But what we do know is that Israel's gone crazy over BDS. It's been said it's the biggest strategic threat to Israel. Why are they constantly trying to demonize BDS activists, demonize BDS victories? Because they know it is a strategic threat to Israel. And that's a strategy I want to follow, and that's a strategy I want to pursue on a mass level, and definitely on a national level at least. And I also believe that we all here want to build a mass movement. We know that that's imperative to bringing change. But I think to build a mass movement, we need to go down to people's levels. We need to engage with all types of people. I agree completely with intersectionality. We need to we're working with fossil-free groups in the UK who are campaigning against fossil fuel investments. We're working with the Black Students campaigns in the UK. But to build a mass movement, we need to simplify things down to people who aren't necessarily historians, who aren't necessarily academics, and it's great to have these discussions in ourselves, but when we're talking to people on a mass level, we need to just, the basic facts of your money should not be going towards the repression of the Palestinian people. And when I got involved in that, I've never felt more positive or proactive in a movement than I have when I was involved in the BDS movement. And I've never, when I speak to people and get people engaged, they see it as something positive because it's something proactive they can do. And that brings me on to answering your question. we said about Zionists on campus, and I'm not going to lie, like there's the pro-Israel lobby, there's definitely repression of Palestinian activists on campus in the UK, just like the US. I wouldn't say it's the same level, but it is there. We have name like 50 pro-Israel groups right now constantly, say things on lawyers for Israel and so forth. One of the immediate ways that we deal with that is we also have lawyers on our side who will tackle that narrative. We are trying to equip students with the legal information they need to know that they have their freedom of speech, that they know their rights to speak up and protest against these things. And I think a lot of it is about support, both on their campuses, but on a national level and ultimately on an international level as well, when they know that they're not alone, that they're fighting alongside other people. But I think one of the most important things I want to say is that when we're campaigning for Palestine, I think it's crucial that we don't become reactive to what the pro-Israel lobby is doing, because that's when I see people going down a spiral, when they're constantly reacting to the pro-Israel lobby. Rather than when we're proactive, we make them react to us, and that is a much better position to be on when we're at the forefront and they are reacting to us. So I always think proactive versus being reactive.
Thank you for that.
I'm going to deal with the three issues, but let me begin with the BDS part. The encroachment on the First Amendment and the American Constitution by the Israel lobby forced institutions like the ACLU, Human Rights Watch, and the Association of American Professors, to name a few, which does not support BDS actually, made them jump on the wagon of supporting our constitution and rights and indirectly supporting BDS, because the Israel lobby is encroaching on our rights as Americans. So it galvanized and brought people into the fold that they might have not joined the struggle without them. Rowan asked me about the Palestinians. I can't speak for all Palestinians, but as I mentioned, the young generation is much more comfortable, much less afraid than the parents, and they are the ones who are forcing the parents to do boycott. But I do have people in my family who would go and buy sabra hummus because they are lazy, because they have excuses, because they came from countries and places that does not understand the freedom of choice and does not understand boycott. So as much as we are trying to educate not the other, we have really a duty and moral duty to educate the Palestinians and the Arab world, but I'm talking about the ones who live in the US. But let me address what Dr. Rabab talked about, Ilhan Omar, Rashida Tlaib, Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, and the hundreds of women who came to the House and to the Senate, unlike before. They are there because of the grassroots movement of the Democratic Party. They are there because they are liberal, they are more progressive, and they pay attention to causes, including the BDS. Will they be elites? Will they become white and the traditional supporters of the bipartisan support that we have endured for the past 70 years? I think they will not be re-elected. You know that a person like Ilhan Omar, why is she being attacked so viciously, although she's not the Palestinian one, unlike Rashida. Both have adopted BDS publicly, but again, it falls into the fact that she is a minority. She is black, she is African, she is woman, she wears the hijab, but she is the first one to call the attention to the fact that the AIPAC and the Israeli lobby finances people who run for office and uses PAC money indirectly in order to elect and de-elect people. And if you go to the platform of the Israel lobby, it tells you we are already preparing candidates to run against these women, and we are going to make sure that they lose. So we are hopeful that they will never be part of the elites. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Someone, I think, said it from the audience that this was the best session, so we can use that quote for the conference. I'm just joking. All the sessions were wonderful, but this let's have a round of applause for the speakers from this session. And let me now turn it to Dr. Samar.
Thank you very much, Junaid, and thank you very much for the panel for this wonderful discussion we've had. And thank you for the audience for staying with us. I just want to say something to Brother Naeem. Back in the first Intifada, between 88 and 92, we founded an organization called the Islamic Committee for Palestine to celebrate the Intifada. And every year we had a conference. And every year we celebrated one of the issues that was not directly related to Palestine. First year we talked about Eritrea. Second year we talked about the African American struggle, as well as, if I remember correctly, Kurdistan that no one was talking about. Third year was about Kashmir. It was Ghulam Nabi Faye who spoke at that conference. Fourth year, it was Afghanistan, and the fifth year was Bosnia. And after that, people know what happened. But these are the type, I agree with you totally, that these struggles are all linked, and we cannot separate them. If I feel the pain of my brother across the continent, he would feel my pain. And when I live in a country like the United States, and you feel the struggle of the African American, he feels your struggle. Actually, the person who addressed us for that African American was none other than Muhammad himself in that conference. In the past 3 days, ladies and gentlemen, brothers and sisters, we assembled over 30 speakers who will talk about different aspects of Palestine. We talked about what happens inside Palestine, what happens outside Palestine. We talked about the different struggles. We talked about the challenges and responses. What we had is just the beginning, not the end. These thought-provoking, great presentations you've listened to, stimulating, illuminating, enlightening, wonderful. And I thought it was in an atmosphere that was brotherly and was feeling that this is something different. And I hope that feeling was put across. We were here to educate, advocate, organize, mobilize, resist, persist, get involved, and empower. These are the concepts that I hope when we depart we'll take back with us. Before I introduce our special guests, director and our special guest, the president of Azad Jammu and Kashmir, I would like to give our panelists here their mementos for a second here, if you allow me. Second is Huda Ammori. Next is Professor Berdal Aral. Then Brother Naeem, Jeenah. Last but not least, Junaid Ahmad. Our co-sponsors are giving our panelists their department place. before we conclude with our special guest, I would like to call to the stage the person who's been the dynamo, the motor behind this whole effort. I want to call to the stage Yunus Akhinis. We had a whole team that Professor Farid Hafiz mentioned today, so I'm sorry if I didn't mention your all names. Everybody knows who you are. Thank you so much. Big round of applause for all of them. Farid is Hafiz. Thank you very much. As I told you at the beginning, Professor Dr. Mehmet Bulut, the director of our university, was on travel, so he couldn't join us on Friday, but he is on Saturday, rather. But he will be with us today to give us our departing remarks. But also, before I bring him to the stage, I would like to introduce our special guest. Brother Naeem Jeenah says, when we talk about Palestine, how come we don't talk about other issues? And I was just laughing within myself because what we have today is not just another issue. We have the president of Azad Kashmir with us tonight. President Sardar Masood Khan is the 27th president of Azad Kashmir. He's a former diplomat. He joined the Foreign Service of Pakistan in 1980 and went on to serve at various diplomatic positions. From August 2003 to March 2005, he served as the spokesperson for the Ministry of Foreign Affairs. He was Pakistan's ambassador and permanent representative to the United Nations and international organizations in Geneva between 2005 and 2008. He served as Pakistan's ambassador to China between September 2008 and September 2012,